The first webinar was held last month, 10th September, on customs import and export procedures. Today's webinar topic will be on cross-border trade facilitation. These webinars have been organized to fill a knowledge gap for representatives of commercial and industrial companies, as well as their service providers on AfCFTA related matters. Our facilitator to navigate us through the topic today and on all other AfCFTA matters is Mr. Dode Seidu. I think he's joined Academy, and today he'll be our facilitator. We expect the webinar to go for about 45 to 1 hour, and then we'll take some questions. So, Mr. Dode, you can come in.
Okay, thank you very much, Kofi. Usually you let your counterpart GIZ Trade Hub do a welcome remark. I don't know if you want to do that before I come. I think Sophia is online.
Yes, because of the presentation, and then maybe she could come in during the questions.
Okay, very well. So please, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so thank you very much and good morning to our distinguished participants. Thank you to GIZ Trade Hub for the opportunity to do this again. And also thank you to the AGI Energy Services Center for the collaboration. As you've heard, today we're going to talk about cross-border trade facilitation as part of a series of webinars to enhance AfCFTA business participation and competitiveness. I would have liked to give you a broad order of our presentation, and I'm going to focus first of all on what trade facilitation is. Then I'll talk about trade facilitation measures and tools in the context of regional trade in ECOWAS. I'll talk about the AfCFTA trade facilitation tools as well, and then also trade facilitation tools from the broader context of the World Trade Organization, which in 2013 members agreed on a broader multilateral agreement to facilitate trade across the globe. Then I'll conclude with some observations and some ideas. My understanding is that I'm speaking to businesses and business people. When we talk about the existing trade facilitation tools that can really benefit you as a business. So, just by way of introduction, the concept of trade facilitation does not have a uniform look at it or
I think Dode is having some difficulties, so let me get to him and then get back to trying to reconnect him. I think his internet has been a little unstable this morning, so please give us 5 minutes and we'll with you shortly. Thank you. Sophia, sorry to put you on the spot, but while Dode is reconnecting, would you like to say some words? Okay, I think Dode is back now. Okay, so we are reconnecting him and then he'll share his screen again.
Apologies. I think for a while I was offline. I just realized.
Yes.
Kofi, please, can you give me rights to share my screen again?
Yes, we are giving you the rights right now. I think if you made a co-host so you can share your screen.
Okay, very well. So I think I was trying to provide these definitions of trade facilitation. And usually, when we talk about trade facilitation from the OECD perspective, it talks about simplification and standardization of procedures associated with information flows required to move goods internationally from seller to buyer and to pass payments in the other direction. So you see a definition that looks at how processes can be simplified and standardized, and also how the information that follows the movement of goods can also be simplified and standardized, and also ensure payment. Then from another UN body, they say trade facilitation is a simplification, standardization, and harmonization of procedures and associated information flows required to move goods from seller to buyer and to make payments. And the primary aim is to help make trade across borders faster and cheaper and more predictable while ensuring its safety and security. So there is this second school of thought that says that if we're thinking about facilitating trade, if we're thinking about enhancing trade, we shouldn't do that at the expense of safety and security of the movement of goods. We should factor safety and security into the conversation. And that's a very important aspect for some schools of thought. The other two definitions build on what I've just mentioned, but let me just say them. So trade facilitation is the simplification and harmonization of international trade procedures, where trade procedures are the activities, practices, and formalities. So here you see that they're including something that is not just the processes and the procedures, but the human behavior, the practices of the institutions behind trade, import, export, and transit, in collecting, presenting, and communicating, processing data and other information required for movement of goods in international trade. Then finally, and this definition is from the World Trade Organization, finally from the World Customs Organization, it says trade facilitation is the avoidance of unnecessary trade restrictiveness. So what it means is that there will be some level of trade restrictiveness, but it should be necessary. This can be achieved by applying modern techniques and technologies while improving the quality of controls in an internationally harmonized manner. So we see four definitions looking at different aspects and different segments of trade facilitation. If you ask me what is trade facilitation for the layperson, I would say that it is basically making processes, procedures, practices of import, export, and transit simpler, uniform across different countries, automated, with the objective that the actors involved will be able to have their goods, traded in a cheaper way, if I can simplify that. But as I will show next, you see here a very simplified representation of what we call the buy, ship, and pay model. And basically, this is used to represent the multiple processes involved in the import and export process. So here, what we are saying is that for import and export to be completed, there are three big tasks that must be undertaken. The first one is that there are processes that involve buying. So you as an importer may have to initiate the process of getting and showing interest in a product, getting interest from the seller, and then you go through the process of going through a contract with the buyer and then, sorry, with the seller, and then now you are able to initiate the buying process. That's a big task. Then the shipping process is once you've been able to agree on the products to buy, that's import, you then are able to go through a process where you contract a shipping line, you contract a freight forwarder, you contract a truck driver. All the processes involved, you're able to get that process also undertaken. Then once the goods cross the border from the seller to the buyer, so from the import side to the export side, it becomes a question about how to pay. You have to also pay for the goods imported. And so under these big tasks, we have these subtasks. And the subtasks are prepared to export. So yes, once you make an inquiry, the exporter on the other side must prepare to export. Then the export takes place, there's transportation, there's prepare for imports, and then there is importation. Then under these, you see several procedures. At least we see 4 key procedures, okay, which are broken down into commercial procedures, transport procedures, regulatory procedures, and financial procedures, all falling under the buy, ship, and pay model. So under the commercial procedure, which is typically within or between the importer and the exporter, or the exporter and the importer, you see that they must establish a contract. The goods must be ordered. You see that there's advice on delivery, there's request for payment, packaging takes place, certification must be done, accreditation may be needed, warehousing takes place before the goods actually move. Then transportation from the warehouse of the producer all the way through to the delivery to the importer or the buyer. There are also procedures. I mean, we are not in Africa, we are not used to establishing transport contracts, especially for a lot of informal trade. But certainly, if you're working with a transporter who is picking the goods from your warehouse to the shipping, the seaport or the airport, there must be some form of a contract. So that is also a procedure to follow and to undertake. Then you have regulatory procedures. These are procedures that involve other institutions. So not just between you, the buyer, and the seller, but in the import and export business, we have intermediaries. We have institutions that play regulatory functions that determine what products are eligible for export. We saw that in the last webinar. Products that are restricted, products that are prohibited, they must sign up that this product is approved for consumption, this product is approved for export. So all of that are regulatory procedures, and you have to go through them. And finally, once the product is delivered, then the payment procedures also kick in. And that's also a lot of steps that must be undertaken. So here I have a graphic that shows the activities between the seller and the buyer in country A and country B. Depending on how you look at it, one could be the buyer, one could be the seller. But certainly the processes that are undertaken in the seller's country are usually also undertaken in a mirror form in the buyer country. So and you have it also at 2 levels. So in the seller country, the seller must undertake activities in their business. I'm trying to make a point, so please bear with me. The seller must undertake activities in their business. So if you look on your left-hand side, you will see physical operations, production, packing, storage. You see, collection from the warehouse, transport to port, entry into port, loading onto the ship. And then on the other side of the buyer, you see unpacking, you see them taking it to their warehouse and all of that. Then in the same country of country A of the seller, they also have to go through export procedures. And like I mentioned, all of these procedures are mirrored. So whatever is done on this side, part of it is also done on the other side. So what is the point of the buy-ship model and this graphic that I showed you? The key point here is that trading involves a lot of stakeholders, okay? For you to be able to import and export, number one, it involves a lot of stakeholders. And principally, you can divide them into three. The business sector, that is the importer, exporter, manufacturer, producer, and all the people within the chain, they are involved. Then you have, on the extreme end, you have the government side, or you have the government side that you deal with when it comes to the regulatory procedures. But in between, you have intermediaries, you have banks, you have freight forwarders, you have financial institutions, you have shipping lines. They all play a role in being able to connect the business sector to the government sector, and then also to be able to import and export successfully. So the point of this short intro here is to highlight the fact, number one, a lot of stakeholders are involved. If all of these stakeholders and the process I've shown have to be followed, there's a lot of transaction cost. And here we're not talking about just the financial cost of transactions. We're talking about even the economic cost, the paperwork you need to fill, you need to input, you need to submit, the regulatory requirements you need to meet, you need to go to this institution, that institution. And so the first thing is the number of stakeholders involved. Number two is for each stakeholder involved, there is some transaction cost. Okay, so like I mentioned, whether it's economic cost or it is financial cost, there is some cost involved. Number three is the fact that within all of these procedures, the exchange between the business sector, the government sector, and the intermediaries is data. A lot of data is exchanged between these stakeholders. However, depending on how the stakeholders interact, they may either work together, as in being able to simplify the process so that the data exchange is collected at once, or is collected multiple times. And just recollecting a study I read in somewhere in Asia, just in the export of rice in one country in Asia, you needed about more than 30 institutions that you have to interact with. And for you to, it involved the exchange of over 200 data points, okay? So if you physically have to go from one institution to the other, that will be a very, very, very cumbersome process. And that would, remember, add to the transaction cost and also, affect the overall price of goods and services sold. So the logic of trade facilitation is, how do you work with all of these stakeholders so that, number one, the transaction cost is low. It doesn't mean there's no transaction cost. The transaction cost will be low. And number two, the data exchanged is also not repetitively collected. And therefore, you see a lot of automation processes, a lot of digitalization processes to harmonize how data is collected and utilized by stakeholders in trade. So, having spoken about transaction costs, there are the direct costs and the indirect costs for the stakeholders in the import, export, and transit business. Indirect cost, there's a cost of documentation and regulatory compliance. For you to just comply with what customs wants, with what the other government agencies want, you need to fail, submit, and provide documents. Number two, there are costs associated with paying for duties, taxes, and levies. And these add to the cost of doing business. There are also the other costs, the cost of moving the goods. So sometimes, the goods in your factory or in your warehouse must be taken and put into a truck. Then, depending on the journey or depending on the means of transport, it must be offloaded at some point for some inspection or the other. These are direct costs. And you see that for many businesses, they factor these costs in the price builder so that the final price at least takes care of all of the costs. So handling costs at the ports. There are handling agencies at the ports, and their costs are factored into the final price and final costing. There's finance and insurance. When the goods are moving and there is damage to the goods, who bears the cost of that? Sometimes the importer and the exporter would decide, discuss, and share the cost, or decide who bears the cost. But eventually the cost must be borne. Then, of course, the intermediate transport cost. So these are some of the direct costs that businesses and government officials face. Now, like I said, when you think about trade facilitation, you may only think about it from the point of view of the private sector, but governments also bear direct costs. For government to be able to effectively provide trade facilitation, they may have to recruit additional staff. Remember, government bodies do not, quote unquote, earn revenue. They pick revenue or money from the broader basket, and therefore recruiting more people, it has implications financially. They may have to institute or implement technological upgrades that is cost. So these are costs that also not just fall on the private sector, but also fall on the public sector. Then you have the indirect costs. So you are at the border is closed, or the border is congested, or there is low staff of the border officials. So maybe they are checking a lot of products and therefore you are delayed. All of these are indirect costs, which lead to overnight stay. So you have a driver who is expected to arrive, his expected arrival time could be at 4 p.m., but due to border delays, arrive the next day, has to pay for a hotel. All of these things are costs that are borne in the trade process. So what I've tried to display to you is the fact that, number one, trading involves a lot of stakeholders, a lot of activities within the business, activities outside the business, and these generate cost, direct and indirect cost. So in looking at trade facilitation, international conventions like the Revised Kyoto Convention provides some 4 key principles that must exist for any process to be said to be trade facilitated or trade facilitation exists. Number one is the fact that there must be transparency in all the processes. And here we're not talking just about the government, we're talking about the private sector as well. So there must be transparency. How decisions, information about import, export are available, are known. They are not hidden in files, hidden on websites, or hidden in offices. They are known. If I want to export something right now, there's a place I can go to and get information as to how to do that export business. So that is the principle of transparency. And therefore, when every trade policy or every trade measure is being developed, the question becomes, has that measure passed the transparency test? Number two, simplification. How simplified is the process? Okay, trade is a very legally dense area of work, and usually you would hear a lot of terms, like I just mentioned, trade policy, you hear tariffs, you hear duties, you hear all kinds of words. The business person is not supposed to be overburdened with the legalese, the technical information. It needs to be presented in a way that is simple. It needs to be presented in a way that they can follow. So not just the information, but sometimes even the forms, sometimes the processes. So you have governments and private sector working together to simplify processes. A process that takes a day, how can it be done in a shorter space of time? These are all part of the simplification processes. Third, harmonization. And here the idea is that because the import-export processes are mirrored and the transit process are mirrored, basically, if you initiate an export process from Ghana, you would typically be collecting the same information that the importing country would need. So how can countries that are involved in import and export harmonize their processes? How can they align their process so that when I pick a form and a customs declaration from China, I can read it. If I pick a customs declaration from Ghana, I can read it. One from South Africa, I can read it. And then the last principle is standardization, how to standardize the processes. So you have international bodies like the World Customs Organization or the World Trade Organization, the likes of ECOWAS and the AfCFTA, trying to standardize processes so that countries can pick that processes and that information to be able to have harmonized, simplified, and transparent processes. So what are some of the benefits of trade facilitation? For governments, and this is something that we need to really look into in detail. For governments, trade facilitation can enhance a country's competitiveness. Usually when we talk about competitiveness, we look at it from two main angles. The first angle is the enterprise competitiveness. I'm a business. How competitive am I? What are my processes? How am I cutting costs? And how am I integrated into global markets? How am I, what is my ability to connect, my ability to be certified? These are at the enterprise level. And that is what enterprises strive to do. At the same time, also, countries can also become competitive if their trade processes, their trade rules, their trade systems are efficient. When they become efficient, it not just benefits the businesses of the importers, but also the whole country becomes an attractive destination competitive-wise. And like the second point I just made, it also adds to the fact that it increases the FDI interest. So if you look at the conversation on regional value chain development and global value chain development, businesses are looking for places where they can locate part of their operations. And if they are not even locating, they can source raw materials. So you take a business that is into cocoa processing, for example, can they buy cocoa beans and move them easily into neighboring Ivory Coast for processing and bring cashew nuts from Ivory Coast into Ghana, for example, for processing? How easy is it to do that? And that easiness would add to the decision of that company to either establish here or not to establish here. So it adds to the increased FDI attraction. Of course, when there is trade facilitated, there is the likelihood of increased trade volumes because importers, exporters like to use ports, seaports, airports, land ports that provide efficient processing. And therefore, it can increase and add to revenue generated for government. Unlike what other people think, when the trade is facilitated, you will lose revenue. No, if you facilitate trade, you could actually increase revenue. I think we've heard in the past discussions about why Togo port is busy or busier than other ports. And some of it is not just a question of, because Togo is a relatively smaller country and has a relatively smaller port, but some of the benefits of their operations is their level of trade facilitation compared to others. It can increase trade compliance. Why would you cut corners if the process is simple? Of course, I know there are some traders who, by virtue of how they got involved in trade, how they, whoever introduced them to the trading, may teach them other ways of doing business. But when trade is facilitated, everyone would like to comply. I would like to go through a border checkpoint, knowing very well that it will not take more than 10 minutes. And if all my documents are right, I'll go through easily. Vis-a-vis, the process is cumbersome. Therefore, I think about other unapproved routes to use and things like that. And then simplified processes, like I said, can also enhance trade compliance. For the private sector, it can reduce the cost of international trade. Ideally, when trade is facilitated, the basic and the most sought for objective is that all of us, those of us on this call, everybody, we all get to benefit through reduced cost, reduced prices of goods and services. So that is a benefit to the private sector. When prices are up, people don't buy, and therefore it goes against the business. Faster clearances also benefits businesses. We've heard about things in supply chain conversations like just in time. So people are talking about just in time. You can only have a just in time processing or production system if you have trade facilitation. what we've seen in other countries and other parts of Africa is that processes are so unpredictable, processes are so challenging that sometimes business have to pay a lot for inputs, the inputs they use. You have to buy several tons of your inputs and warehouse them and pay duties on them when you actually don't need them. You only need them when you produce or when you are producing. And therefore, it adds to the cost of warehousing, sometimes not just the warehousing, security of the warehouse, the insurance associated with that, and things like that. Trade facilitation can actually enhance SME participation in international trade. Now, many SMEs are not fully participating and fully benefiting from international trade. Why? Because compliance processes are difficult to them. And therefore, if there are simplified processes, if there are transparent processes, they can understand it, it can benefit them. Then I've mentioned the competitiveness again, because there are two sides of the competitiveness: the internal competitiveness versus the external competitiveness, the countrywide competitiveness. If I'm able to get the raw materials at a lower cost, but then processes, transportation cost, and things like that are so prohibitive, then I may not be able to be competitive. And the list goes on. So now let's talk about trade facilitation measures at the ECOWAS level. And I want to go from there because even though we're going to talk about the AfCFTA, we are in a region and there are certain trade facilitation tools that you can leverage and take advantage of. So within ECOWAS, 15 of us, we have a couple of measures. One of them, or the three of them, or four of them, are the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme. And this is a tool initiated to facilitate trade of goods originating within ECOWAS. So it's only applicable to goods originating in ECOWAS. And I'll talk about the process to getting that origination certification done. We have a customs code in ECOWAS. We have the ECOWAS SIGMAT system, which is a French acronym for an integrated ICT system that allows for transit of goods. And then we've been talking about a single currency for a while. I will not talk about single currency today. I'll talk about the three trade facilitation tools that you can leverage. So the ETLS operationalizes the ECOWAS Free Trade Area, or the ECOWAS Customs Union. It allows for movement of originating products without the payment of customs duties and taxes in ECOWAS member states. However, the products must be pre-approved. The products must be pre-approved to allow for import and export. And the process requires you to submit an application, in the case of Ghana, to the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Other countries, it could be your Foreign Affairs Ministry, for example. So just let me clarify this. The ETLS applies to what we call processed or industrial goods. Sorry. Processed or industrial goods. It does not apply to, as in the pre-approval, does not apply to agricultural produce. If you grow your livestock, if you harvested your cassava raw form, if you grew your rice, those are originating automatically. However, you need to have other evidence of supporting documents. So for example, if you're moving livestock in ECOWAS, there must be some SPS or veterinary certificate to go with the livestock movement. What people do is that, yes, they raise the animal, they export the animal, and they think that because the animal is coming from Burkina Faso or Ghana, it should just move without any documentation. Wrong. You don't need the ETLS for the agricultural products. But once the product is processed, once the product is an industrial product, so let's say you make aluminum pans, you make electrical cables, you make canned tuna, you make floor tiles. And that is actually the objective of the trade agreement, is to create industrialization. So once you make these products, you need to apply for the ETLS to be able to export and import within the 15 members of ECOWAS. So like I mentioned, you apply through your Ministry of Trade and Industry. A National Approval Committee would sit on the application, review it. Sometimes they may visit your premises to verify if the product is indeed manufactured as you claim. And then once they've approved it, they will send your approved application to the ECOWAS Commission. The ECOWAS Commission will also review the application. And if they are satisfied, they would now issue an approval letter that your product is now eligible for ETLS. But that is not the end. When they issue that letter, the ECOWAS Commission has to notify the 50 member states that your product has been approved as an ETLS product. And whenever you are exporting the product, you have to add the letter in addition to your certificate of origin and all of those things to be able to export. So please take note, the ETLS applies to industrial goods. It does not apply to agricultural products. However, agricultural products must have certification and documentation to support their movement. So there's also an ECOWAS customs code. And basically this code provides a compendium of processes that ECOWAS member states customs must follow. It's a guide. It's not a legal document, unlike the ETLS, which is a legal, has a legal, but it's just a code of good practice that the countries must follow. Now, within the ECOWAS framework itself, we also have the SIGMAT, which I mentioned. It's a customs interconnection, process. Basically, it allows the customs authorities of the ECOWAS countries to exchange data on transit goods. So when goods are originating from one country, they are able to tell the other country to expect the goods. So let's say we have products originating from, let's say, Cote d'Ivoire, going into, let's say, Lomé. Once the goods move and they get to the Noé Elubo checkpoint, this system will be able to share the data to say the goods have left Cote d'Ivoire and they are entering Ghana. And Ghana will notify Togo that the goods coming to Togo have entered Ghana, and they wait for the exit at Aflao to be able to notify Togo that the goods have now left Ghana and are approaching, Lomé. Now, I'm explaining it in a simple form, but the challenge has been that whilst we also have a lot of transit trade, whether it's along the coast or north-south between ECOWAS countries, data exchange is a way of facilitating trade. If I know that a truckload of tiles is coming from, or cement is coming from Cote d'Ivoire, made in Cote d'Ivoire, coming into, let's say, Ghana or Togo, that information should help me in advance to know what to look for. If I'm a customs officer, I want to conduct an inspection, I should know. Okay. If I find, let's say, any other material other than the cement in the truck, that is a big issue for concern. But if I had no idea, I may not facilitate trade. I may just play, be trying to do my work, quote unquote, in a difficult way. So this is something that has been supported by the World Bank, GIZ, and others to enhance and facilitate trade within ECOWAS. It's been implemented mostly in the French countries. Ghana is participating actively and should be interconnected by now. So that goods moving, there'll be exchange of information. Now, what I've described so far, the ECOWAS measures are principally actions by the ECOWAS Commission and the member states. There are other trade facilitation tools that exist that I want to recommend for your consideration. One is what we call the border information centers. So these are often structures, kiosks, some of which are supported by member states like Ghana Shippers Authority or Nigeria Shippers Council, that help provide on-the-ground support at the border. If you get to a border community like Aflao, or you get to Noipe Akanu, there's a kiosk you can go to say, look, what is the process for taking these products through? Or I'm having this challenge. The officer says, this is the thing I've done wrong. Am I right or wrong? And you can either be assisted or the process clarified. If there's a misunderstanding, there's somebody there who's supposed to provide that assistance. It's something that is been novel, is practiced in other parts of Africa because of the large volume of small-scale cross-border traders who may have challenges at the border. So this is a place for solutions. The only challenge is that it's not been operational in many of the border towns. Sometimes staffing cost has affected the availability of people to help, but they exist. Use them. The second one is an innovative tool called the Borderless and Ghana Shippers Authority Non-Tariff Alert Platform, which I want to recommend for you if you have any challenge on the border, along the corridor, you are traveling with your goods and you have challenges, you can log in and report the challenge. In the back end, there is a system of people who to, you can put a screenshot on the slide for you to see. Customs, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Trade, whatever the issue is, the institution responsible takes it up. Now, there's also another one developed by ECOWAS and ITC called the TWAM, the Trade Alert Obstacle Mechanism. It's also a mechanism where you can report and any issue you have. The only difference is that the TWAM is not like the alert system, where the borderless system, where you can get instant help. It may take a while, but it's a mechanism that reports the incidence of non-tariff barriers. If you have any challenges, you can use that. Then finally, for ECOWAS, we have a group called the WACTA, the West African Association of Cross-Border Trade and Agroforestry, Pastoral, and Fisheries Products. So these are a large group of small-scale, medium-scale, even large-scale traders who move goods across West Africa, from Burkina to Dakar, Senegal, Mali, anywhere. And they've created a platform. I'm actually on the platform. It's a WhatsApp group, but it's for members. So if you join the group, then they also have a WhatsApp group platform where if you report a challenge, assistance can be given. So that is just by way of suggestion for your consideration. Now, another tool that has been very commonly discussed is the World Trade Organization Trade Facilitation Agreement. And this particular tool has been, like I said, it came into force agreement, which I'm back. Am I back?
Yes, you are back now.
I don't know what is happening, but sorry for. So for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to talk about the 12 major articles, and they provide an overview of the key measures. Oh, sorry. So these 12 measures in a nutshell are here, and I may be repeating them subsequently as well. So the main things of the WTO trade facility agreement, like I said, is to provide mechanisms for facilitating trade. And some of those mechanisms are, number one, they need to publish all trade-related information on a website electronically. So you're not looking for a document, you're not looking for a procedure or a process, and you don't know what to do or where to go. They're supposed to be what we call trade information portals. Speaking from Ghana, we have, and across the world, there are different formats. So you have countries that have just one information portal, and you go there and you get everything. In Ghana, we have multiple sites. So, for example, you go to the GEPA website, you will learn something about exports or imports. You go to PPRSD, the Plant Protection and Regulatory Service Directorate, you learn something about. So that is the process we have. We don't have a unified trade portal that you can visit and get everything. Now, much as I'm the one doing this facilitation, I want to mention that it's not as easy as to say, let's have one portal. You know, trade information is always fast changing. So sometimes you have countries that have one portal, but information is outdated. How do you share responsibilities between who provides the information, who updates the website, and things like that? Then you also have what we call the inquiry points. So inquiry points are supposed to have an office or a person to whom you can ask questions. So I mentioned the border information centers. That's a type of inquiry point. You could also have, you know, inquiry points. Let's say you go to Ghana Standards Authority, they are an inquiry point on technical barriers to trade. They are an inquiry point if you are looking at export of fish or import of fish. So that is an example. We have what we call opportunity to comment. I'm going by article by article. Opportunity to comment. And this sometimes where private sector people also don't use some of these trade facilitation tools. So every trade legislation, every trade procedure by WTO requirements, and Ghana is a ratified member of the WTO and also the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. Every change, every policy must be published and stakeholders giving an opportunity to comment. In my experience, many stakeholders don't pay attention. We have in Ghana, for example, the Business Regulatory Reform Platform, which is an online platform where any legislation often by the Ministry of Trade Industry is published on, and they ask for memoranda, they ask for information, inputs, and sometimes for months it's advertised. Sometimes you even call stakeholders to come, they won't come. And sometimes when stakeholders come, they come with a preconceived and not a willingness to engage, to discuss, to even understand, to say, okay, you want to increase, let's say, the levy on this procedure, or you want to add this procedure. What is the procedure? Why do you want to add it? To even seek to understand, to go back to your members, to consult, to say, okay, we agree or we don't agree. But even if we don't agree, if a measure like this will be put in place, we think it should be put in place that you make cogent submissions, cogent inputs to the policymaker. The policymaker is not benefited if you go to him or her with opposition without evidence and no alternatives. Just saying for the sake of this conversation. We have an article on advanced rulings. So this is a measure, a trade facilitation measure where a trader can request for a decision of customs on an import or export before it arrives. And usually there are certain conditions set in the law. In Ghana, Customs Act, Act 891, I think 2015, has the conditions apply for advanced rulings. It's there, please. Procedures or rights for appeal or review. So the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement provides an opportunity where any custom decision that you are not happy with, you can request for a review. If you go to the customs headquarters in Accra, at the ministries, they have a Customs Technical Services Bureau, and they have an office for appeal. But note, if I remember somebody said, well, I went there for an appeal because I wasn't happy with the customs duties I had been levied with, and rather when I went, it was increased. It was increased because when the officer investigated the application for review, he actually found out that the previous officer had made a mistake. So I'm saying that if you are going for a review or appeal, you must be sure that you understand what you are appealing for. Number 5 is, so here, any country that institutes an enhanced control, like let's say they are putting in place extra measures, import and export, they're supposed to notify the other WTO members. If they need to take samples, those procedures and those information must be provided. So we're taking samples of 3, where the labs are and things like that. All of those things must be provided. In Article 6, there is provisions that deals with fees and charges. What are the applicable fees and charges that must be charged, that must be levied on import and export, and how those fees and charges must be levied. They must even be published. So you must know that if I park my car, my truck at the Tema port, it's the levy for parking my truck is this amount. If I weigh my truck, it is this amount. I'm just using examples. I don't know if weighing of your truck accounts for the charge, but just for you to know. So the fees and charges are published and known. Article 7 deals with a couple of things. So electronic platforms for submission of documentation, use of electronic payments, implementation of risk management systems, publication of average time release studies, post-clearance audits, authorized economic operator programs, and then prioritizing perishable goods. Article 8 deals with border agency cooperation, where the requirement is that border agencies must cooperate. They must work together to benefit the importer and exporter. So you don't get to the point, whether it's the seaport, the land port, or the airport, and they say, oh, this institution has closed. Yeah, one of the inspection agents has closed, so we are unable to, or he's gone out, he's not around, so we're unable to inspect your goods. That is not correct. That is not best practice by international rules of trade facilitation. The next one is movement of goods intended for import under customs control. So it's to allow for movement of goods under customs control if they are meant for import. So Article 10 deals with the need to establish single window systems. I think I'll talk about that when I talk about the AfCFTA annex on trade facilitation. The use of customs brokers. So customs brokers are very important in international trade. They assist and help with processes. However, countries are supposed to publish how to use customs brokers and if it's a requirement. In Ghana, even though it is not a requirement, you are supposed to only deal with customs if you are authorized, if you have the knowledge and certification to deal with them. So invariably, you have to work with a customs agent. If you ask me, what do I advise? I would say that get a good one. If you get a good freight forwarder, you get a good customs agent, your life will be easier in this part of the world. Some people want to do DIY in everything. By the time you DIY with your import, you may have aged a lot. Just as a joke, please. Article 10 looks at freedom of transit. So this is a requirement that allows for goods originating from one country intended for a third country to go through your corridor, your country, your territory. So like I mentioned, you're importing goods from, let's say, South Africa, meant for Burkina Faso. So the goods come by ship to Ghana. Ghana must allow freedom of transit if the goods are intended for Burkina Faso. So there's a transit process. There are transit routes, approved routes for transit cargo to go through. There are tracking systems, tracking devices that must be used. And finally, we talk about customs cooperation, how customs and customs authorities must work together. So especially if you are neighbors, so we have a system called a joint border post. For example, Ghana and Togo has a joint border post at a place called Noipe and Akanu Noipe. And you go there, you see the customs of Togo, the customs of Ghana, immigration of Togo, immigration of Ghana, and all the other border agencies working together. They are physically located in one place, unlike AfCFTA, where you have to end one process and start the other process through a no man's land. This is quite a harmonized and a simplified process. Kofi, should I pause here for questions or I should continue?
Yes, I think it would be okay for us to pause for a couple of questions before we continue. Maybe some of them forget their questions or it will pile up too much. So
okay.
What we'll do is we'll open the floor to questions. If you have a question, kindly raise your hand up so we can mention your name. And then you'd come up and then ask your question. Mr. Seidu will answer it for you. After a few rounds of questions, we'll go on with the second part of the presentation. Mr. Seidu, I think you're muted.
Yes, I was asking if we had any hands.
I'm checking through. Okay, so before they even bring it up, from my little knowledge, or the main question I could bring up, you mentioned countries become more competitive if their trade processes are efficient. So basically, the more efficient the trade process, the more competitive the country seem. In your expert opinion and from where you sit, would you say Ghana's trade processes are efficient? Are we at that level yet?
I would say that Ghana's processes are efficient. Of course, we have to have a relative comparison because if you look at all the measures we put in place, trade facilitation wise, we are one of the leading in my view. Of course, there are some challenges that deal with things like cost, the cost of duties, the cost of processes, and I have a favorite statement I make to trade facilitation people, that trade facilitation is not a destination. It's a continuous process of improvement. And so if you stagnate or you don't keep improving, others may beat you, others may become more competitive with time. So if you look at countries in ASEAN region or Latin America, you see a lot of unstoppable improvement. Like they're always changing something, they're always improving something, unlike other parts of the world or in Africa where maybe we're able to put in a process and therefore we think that is because it's efficient now, it is so we can continuously improve. In Eastern Africa, they have a process they introduced recently called the simplified trade regime. And basically, it is a process where small-scale cross-border traders who declare their import or export of a certain value, maybe $500 or below, get a tax waiver. They don't pay the duty on it. Okay, so that is something they did to get a lot of small-scale cross-border traders, informal traders, to now declare their goods. Once you declare, you will get a tax waived. But in West Africa, we don't have such we have a simplified declaration system, but we don't have a waiver on the duty, for example. And so people, some people are still yes. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, so it seems most of the questions haven't come up yet. So what we could do is you can continue with the second part of the presentation, and whilst you are going, they can type the questions in the chat box. Once we are done, we'll start asking the questions. I think that will work.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. So, I mean, for trade facilitation in the context of the AfCFTA, it's not too different from, in terms of the measures. It's just the difference is in how the AfCFTA protocol on trading goods and export on trade facilitation is laid out. But in terms of the trade facilitation measures, it is similar. So I'm just going to spend some time talking about a few things. One of them is the fact that trade facilitation is also necessary because of the high levels of non-tariff barriers. Okay, if I say we, I mean Africans, I observe a lot of institution of measures that result in non-tariff barriers. Now, we distinguish between non-tariff measures and non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff measures are legitimate policy instruments that governments must implement to control the movement of goods. Okay. However, if they are implemented in a discriminatory manner, if they are implemented in a manner that is not transparent, that is not simplified, harmonized, and standardized, like I showed earlier, then it becomes a non-tariff barrier. So let's say, for example, we want every exporter to register to export. Why? Because for years, people export products and the products don't meet the standards. They don't have certain characteristics, and it goes against the country Ghana. So somebody exports white flies infested mangoes, and we don't know who they are. We don't know if they are indeed in the business of mango exports or something like that. So a policy measure is like, okay, anybody exporting from Ghana or from my country should have a registration. We should know their business registration, because technically in Ghana, exporting, you must be a legal person or a registered person. So that is one. Number two, we want to know where they operate from. We want to, so that is one. Then we have an organization that says, okay, if you are an exporter of mangoes, we want to know where you package your mangoes. So I'm saying that this is a legitimate measure. If you look at it from the point of view of consumers and the blackmailing of a country in terms of getting bad press for the products, is a good measure. But if it's implemented in a partial way, so let's say certain exporters must register, certain must not, and then it becomes a type of non-tariff measure. And so when the AfCFTA was starting, UNCTAD did a study and said that if the biggest benefits of the AfCFTA is not in the tariff reduction, it's rather in the removal of non-tariff barriers, the reduction non-tariff barriers. And I hope somebody who is in the policy space will always think about the four principles for any measure they are putting in place. Even if it's legitimate, is it transparent? Was it developed in a transparent way? How simple is it? How easy is it for people to comply? Is it harmonized? And is it standardized? That is the point I wanted to make here. So I have here a set of things I've mentioned already, which are principally from the AfCFTA and also the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. And so when I finish that, then I'll bring my speaking to an end, and then I'll ask for questions. So all the things the AfCFTA, just like the WTO, requires is the establishment of single window platforms. And single window platforms are basically automated systems for the multiple agencies involved in trade to speak to each other, to collect information, provide approvals, provide licenses, provide certifications, without the trader needing to go one by one to each place. So if, let's say, I'm importing pharmaceutical products from South Africa, and the first thing I have to do is to get a sample for FDA to approve. So once FDA approval process is done, I upload it into the ICOMS, the Ghana Integrated Customs Management System. And then every time I'm importing that same product, I just show the letter from FDA that this drug has already been approved. And therefore, I don't have to go back to FDA every time for that. Of course, I may have to request to FDA that I'm importing this volume, and they go into the ICOM system and give me the approval. So the physical movement, moving from institution to institution, is removed by the single window. I mean, as we speak now, you cannot do import and export without a single window. So it's already known. Risk management system. So customs are supposed to implement, and the other institutions are supposed to implement a risk management system. So basically, all the goods we import and export are kind of like ranked based on risk of any kind. It could be risk due to health, that if this product is not controlled and released onto the market at the point of import, it could be dangerous to human consumption. It could be risk based on revenue. It could be risk based on any other thing. So chemicals and all of that. So we have over 30 institutions from EPA, FDA. I mean, EPA stands for Environmental Protection Agency, Food Drugs Authority, GSA, Energy Commission, you name them. All of them have products of interest to them. So they provide information to customs, and customs creates a risk management system. And so anytime you import or you are exporting a product like that, it will be flagged for verification. Okay. Now, why is it important to you as an importer or exporter? It's important to you because if you don't know the necessary documentation you have to get, the necessary certificate you have to get, you may always have challenges at the point of risk management, because the risk management determines if the product should be allowed to go free of inspection, whether it should be inspected, and to what details should be inspected. Okay. And therefore, what are the kind of licenses you need to have or permits you need to have the product, imported or exported. Pre-arrival processing. This allows you to start your processing before the goods arrive. In a recent average time release study that was conducted by GRA Customs, it was found out that it took sometimes close to 2 weeks when goods arrive at the ports for the importer to clear them. And one reason for this delay was because many traders are not aware of the pre-manifest declaration within the ICOM system. So whenever you are importing, you can start the process. Once the goods leave the country, you can submit the document. If you have the manifest, you can already start the process before the goods arrive. You can start looking for your import duty before the goods. There's actually a duty calculator in the ICOM system. The only thing that may affect your duty payment may be the exchange rate on the day of clearing. But otherwise, you can have an idea as to how much you need to clear the goods when the goods arrive. So non-tariff barriers. For the AfCFTA, there is a non-tariff barrier, Annex 5. that deals with how non-tariff barriers are to be eliminated. The key thing about the AfCFTA non-tariff barrier annex is that it introduces a non-tariff barrier reporting mechanism, just like what I explained earlier. So there is an ntb.africa where you can report a barrier if you face a barrier, let's say moving goods from Kenya overland through Cameroon or wherever to Ghana. If you have a problem, you can also report it there, and you have a resolution undertaken. I've mentioned advanced rulings already. It's a measure you can use as a trade facilitation measure, especially advanced rulings, for example, can apply to classification. Remember the last time we spoke about classification, how your goods are classified. You have some industries or products where whenever they import, classification changes by customs. You can write to customs and say, I import X product, and every time it comes, I have this challenge. Can you help me with a ruling? Can you give me a determination as to the appropriate classification for this product? If the product is not easily classified, there's a customs classification committee. They will sit, they will look at other factors and give you a classification. So every time you import, you just add a letter to your import, and there's no argument with customs as to the appropriate classification that applies. I've mentioned inquiry points. Please, let's use inquiry points. Inquiry points are available vice versa. You can write an email to the inquiry point of South Africa to say, South Africa, how do I export vehicle types or vehicles from South Africa to Ghana? What are the regulatory requirements I need to follow? They'll tell you. If you write to GSA, the Technical Barriers to Trade inquiry point, to say, I want to export vehicles from Ghana to South Africa, what are the processes? They'll be able to tell you. I'm not able to tell you how long it will take for them to tell you, but they have an obligation under the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement to tell you. I've mentioned publication, so everything must be published. Publish, publish, publish. If it's not published, demand that it is published. There's a requirement to separate release of goods from determination of duty. This is a customs privilege they give, where they can allow you to take your goods to your factory, subject to certain conditions, before the duty is determined. So it's not every importer who pays their duty before they clear. Some are able to clear based on if they satisfy certain customs requirements. So if, let's say, I imported pharmaceuticals, vaccines, or vaccine inputs, and I need to take them to my factory, there's no cold house or cold chain at the airport, I can, with customs prior knowledge, I can take them to my factory, and then later we discuss the duty. So e-payment, so now you can pay for your duty by different means. I remember years ago, there used to be a popular place in Tema called the Tema Long Room. That was the only place you could pay for duty for your imports. But now you can pay from the comfort of your office. We have the Authorized Economic Operator Program opportunity for compliant traders, where you can get certain preferential treatment when you import. And the process for getting your Authorized Economic Operator license is with customs. So visit customs. We have expedited shipments, where certain processes are expedited for a particular shipment. We have prioritizing perishable goods. So if you are importing fish, you are importing pineapples, you are exporting certain product, how to prioritize that. I've talked about fees and charges already. I've also talked about border agency cooperation. Post-clearance audits. So customs has the right to conduct a post-clearance audit. So once any type of importer, once you clear your goods, customs can visit you to say, okay, you've been going through our ports for some time. We would like to verify your imports data. So it's an audit process. You are usually informed before they come, and when they come, they go through the process. What I've heard and learned is that a lot of businesses do not keep records. Especially the law requires you to keep your import-export records for at least 5 years. 5 years. So when they come and they're asking for the records, you should be able to provide the records of your imports. Customs cooperation. So all the red boxes, apart from the 2 boxes, are separate annexes within the AfCFTA protocol on trading goods. And then
I think Dode's internet has given him challenges again. I think he was almost at the end of the presentation, but let me see if we could get him to reconnect once more so that we could finish it up. I think we are almost at the time we decided we'll end the presentation today at 11:30. He will be joining shortly. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if Sophia gives a few remarks before we close. Sophia, if you could come up real quick. Thank you.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. My internet has also been on and off. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of GIZ, let me thank you for your time. I know that it's been a longish session. The input was a bit longer this time around, but I hope it has been useful. I already saw in the chat a comment on the institutions that are involved. We can try to see if Dode can take that on board and add that to the presentation as well. The topic of trade facilitation is a complex one. It's also a topic that we've been supporting as GIZ with working with especially Ghana Revenue Authority, Customs Division, but also other institutions. The interesting thing about AfCFTA, and I hope that's what's going to happen as AfCFTA gets implemented more deeply. Hi, Dode. Sorry, I had to butt in your absence, so apologies.
Thank you.
But there is a comment.
So can I just wrap up and then you continue, please?
Yes, please. There's also a comment in the chat about some of the institutions that are involved as well in these processes. Dode, if you could take that on. But please continue and conclude so we can also bring the session to an end on time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for, So I said trade facilitation instruments must be applied for or utilized. They are not automatically effective. If you don't apply for authorized economic operator, you will not get it. If you don't apply for authorized advanced rulings, you will not get it. If you don't search for an inquiry point, nobody will tell you that this is the process to follow. Okay. Sometimes people complain, oh, well, I mean, I was there, this person got this preferential treatment, I didn't get it. They applied for it. Trade facilitation is a shared responsibility between the private sector, businesses, and government. It's a shared responsibility. Much as you expect the government to give you, to facilitate your trade, it's also your job to make sure your processes, your systems, and how you do your business is clear, is good. So for example, if you misclassify your products and therefore you are being detained, your products are being detained for further inspection, you cannot just blame the government official. It could be that you and your freight forwarder didn't do a good job. Trade facilitation does not only deal with customs, it involves other government agencies. Usually you hear people saying, oh, the customs are this, the customs are that. The customs have a responsibility called agency services. So in many respects, in many borders, the customs represent the veterinary service. They represent the Environmental Protection Agency. They represent the police. If they see something, they would alert the police or act on behalf of the police. And therefore, if you know that whatever you are importing or exporting requires a police permit, it is in your interest to get it. Okay. Number 5, every trade facilitation benefit you enjoy, remember there are obligations. Keep them. If you enjoy expedited exports, if you enjoy expedited clearance, know that they will come back to check your process. Are you indeed fulfilling your obligations of the benefits you get? Okay. So for example, there's this phenomenon called Deka in our local parlance. Deka means 1-1. And apparently it's a process where some traders trying to outsmart the customs break their cargo into smaller units. So you heard, I said, we have the head load policy or the simplified declaration. And therefore, if you declare that, oh, maybe I just have this $200 worth of products, oh, it's okay, just fill this form and go. So somebody may have $10,000 worth of products and must declare and pay the duty on them, but they rather break it down into $200 units and then give it to maybe how many people to cross the border. And carry the products in smaller bits to your shop, but when the customs come to check, they'll be like, wow, how did you get 20, like, how did you get all of these products in smaller units? Just saying as an example. Then number 6, trade facilitation benefits can be revoked. So use them correctly. So if you're getting any trade facilitation benefits, they can be revoked. So use them the correct way. And finally, trade regulations and requirements change frequently. Stay updated. Stay updated. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sophia and Kofi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Seidu. Sophia, I think, had to drop off or will be dropping off very soon. So there were a couple of, sorry, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. There were just a few comments, no specific questions from the audience. Someone mentioned that they suggest the various institutions where detailed information can be acquired if it could be listed clearly in the presentations before we share it with them so that they could use it for future reference. That was the main comment we had. Yeah, aside that we haven't got any questions, I'd like to assume that means the presentation was very clear and everyone understood it. We are almost also at the end of the time we gave for the presentation. What I could say is if anyone has any further information, they could send via email or via text or contact us or the trade or the GIZ Trade Hub, and we'll be able to answer with anything that they require. Mr. Seidu, I don't know, do you have any closing thoughts since there's no other question?
Well, I would like to say that trade is a very, very big opportunity for businesses to grow and expand their markets. And I want to say that trade facilitation measures exist for the advantage of businesses. Business should therefore, like I said, keep updated, learn a lot, and leverage them. There are institutions that you can also go to for support and advice, of course, at a fee, to better know and utilize some of the trade facilitation measures. That would be my submission for now. But thank you very much to the GIZ Trade Hub and also to the AGI Energy Service Center. It's been a nice collaboration. I think our next one is on September 18th and it's on cross-border trade finance. Looking forward to that.
I think October 18th. Yeah, but before that, yes. I think one hand is up. Kweku Enchi Bencho.
Okay.
If you could unmute and if you have a question or comment before we leave.
Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. Dode, thank you for your submission. It was very insightful. I wanted to ask, just to rejig my memory, when it came to the ECOWAS ALTS, you spoke about the custom procedures. My question is, if African countries are looking to onboard onto AfCFTA, would custom procedures of AfCFTA now supersede that of ECOWAS LTS? Are countries supposed to give away, not give away, but would now regional bodies now come under the whole AfCFTA agreement? So custom procedures around AfCFTA now supersede that of regional bodies. That's what I want to find out.
Well, I'll say that the answer is no. The ETLS is a regional tool, is a regional trading tool. It's been in existence far longer than the AfCFTA. It's actually in use effectively. There are businesses across West Africa that are registered and trading under the ETLS. And the ETLS covers every product originating in ECOWAS region. However, the AfCFTA covers 90%, technically 90% of products. So if you are in ECOWAS region, I would recommend that you use the ETLS to do your import and export within ECOWAS. However, if you are going outside of ECOWAS, then you have to use the AfCFTA processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dode. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we've posted a short survey in the chat, so kindly fill it up for us. It helps us with our feedback for us to be able to do better webinars for you. So kindly fill the survey written in the chat sheet. Is there any other comment or question before we leave? Okay, so it seems there's nothing else. Thank you, Dode, again for your time. Thank you all for participating in today's webinar. I know there were some challenges and technical difficulties. We apologize for that.
Yes, apologies. Yes.
We look forward to seeing you on the 18th of October for the next topic, which is cross-border trade facilitation. Cross-border trade finance. So thank you all for joining and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Solutions to businesses. We provide you with solar feasibility studies, energy audits, energy efficiency trainings, and financial advisory services. Visit AGI-ESC.com for more information or call us on 0507 977 902. AGI-ESC, Sustainable Energy for Profitability, an initiative of the Association of Ghana Industries in partnership with the German Development Corporation, implemented by GIZ. What if the answer to powering and running a clean, efficient, and sustainable business now lies within your reach? What would you do? All you have to do is reach out to the AGI Energy Service Center. We provide tailor-made energy saving solutions to businesses. We provide you with solar feasibility studies, energy audits, energy efficiency trainings, and financial advisory services. Visit AGI-ESC.com for more information or call us on 0507 977 902. AGI-ESC, Sustainable Energy for Profitability, an initiative of the Association of Ghana Industries in partnership with the German Development Corporation, implemented by GIZ. What if the answer to powering and running a clean, efficient, and sustainable business now lies within your reach? What would you do? All you have to do is reach out to the AGI Energy Service Center. We provide tailor-made energy saving solutions to businesses. We provide you with solar feasibility studies, energy audits, energy efficiency trainings, and financial advisory services. Visit AGI-ESC.com for more information or call us on 0507 977 902. AGI-ESC, Sustainable Energy for Profitability, an initiative of the Association of Ghana Industries in partnership with the German Development Corporation, implemented by GIZ. What if the answer to powering and running a clean, efficient, and sustainable business now lies within your reach? What would you do? All you have to do is reach out to the AGI Energy Service Center. We provide tailor-made energy saving solutions to businesses. We provide you with solar feasibility studies, energy audits, energy efficiency trainings, and financial advisory services. Visit AGI-ESC.com for more information or call us on 0507 977 902. AGI-ESC, Sustainable Energy for Profitability, an initiative of the Association of Ghana Industries in partnership with the German Development Corporation, implemented by GIZ. What if the answer